It's called the Mobius strip. I think it's called, the subtitle is A Spatial History of a Colonial Society, Guerrero, Mexico. And basically the metaphor of the Mobius strip, which some people like, some people don't, is really that space is very malleable. It gives illusions of dimensionality where none might exist. So I'm really looking at spatial processes in a colonial society. I look at migration, I look at land tenure, and I look at commerce, and I look at different ways people act in space and form space around them. Well, I'd always felt as an anthropologist, I started reading geography. I just always felt that geographers were sort of cutting edge, let's say. They really dealt with issues that I thought were very important for understanding society and how people interact with it. I think that the spatial process is a good way to analyze the tension between sort of individual agency and external control, state control. So I took space as a metaphor in that. I guess not a metaphor, as a field of study in which I could look at the interaction between agency and structure. And I also like geography because the geography that I read was not very jargonistic. I think anthropology, with sort of a postmodern influence or just trying to be overly theoretically, has sort of gotten away from really communicating with a wider audience. It's gotten more and more specialized and more dense, I think. So I like geography. I found that had a lot of things to say. I think it was constant sort of just finding forks in the road and going on one side and then getting another fork and going another way. So I don't think I envisioned where I would arrive at when I started. As I say, I'm an anthropologist. I did ethnographic field work. And for personal reasons, I was in Mexico City for a long time, and I started doing archival research. The book originally started out as sort of the historical background that starts every ethnography, maybe a short chapter. And I was very dissatisfied with sort of the glib statements that often accompany that. I said, okay, I'm in Mexico City, I have money, I was lucky enough to get a grant to do the background research, and I just started, I worked in the archive for maybe 2 years, and there was too much there for an introductory chapter. On space in the area in which I lived. So it just expanded into a book. When I wrote the book, I didn't think of publishing it. So it was a humongous manuscript. It was 1,200 pages of actual text plus bibliography and appendices and things like that. And I got done, I was very happy, and then only one press would look at it, basically Stanford. Which I'm very lucky for. But basically now, if you have a manuscript over 400 pages, you can almost forget about publishing it, especially as a first author. So I just didn't even think about it. Nobody said it to me. You know, they sort of said, oh, keep it short, but I said, okay. I didn't think of the conversion of thesis to book as a problem. I thought if it was good, it would get published, and I was lucky. It did get published, whether it's good or not, but it's not easy now to publish long books. I'm a multitasking person. One of the reasons I'm working as an independent scholar, be able to do it, is because I can be thinking of 3 things at once, and that's very good for certain things. It's not very good for writing. I think what you really need for writing is just to isolate yourself, get everything out of your mind, and really it's you and the text. And that's how I do it. When I was writing, I basically got to the point where I would just sit in the room isolated and just read and read and read. I'd read over my text. I wasted a lot of paper because I like reading it on paper, so I'd change a few sentences around and then print it out. I remember I was always worried about changing things for the worse. What if you change it? And I was backing up and had, copy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And after a while, that never happened, and I was surprised. That I always felt that when I changed something, I sort of changed it for the better. Or if I had to change it back, it was only one step. I never felt that I had to go back 3 versions and what I had said there. And that I was surprised about, that I actually had the ability to actually see what was wrong and feel happy that it was better. So I started being able to do that, just edit a little bit and say this is better and then move on to something else. I think the most important thing is just to clear your mind and focus on words. There's a right word for every context. And sometimes you just might spend an hour trying to just get it just right. And I really enjoyed that process. That's a lovely process when you're there. And you feel that you've just made the text, I don't know, rich or something. You can sink your teeth into it. And a lot of writing is not like that. I find it very boring. So when you read something that's well written, it's just a pleasure, because a very simple sentence has a lot of permutations. There's a lot of connotations to it. There's a lot of, how can you put it? It makes you think about different things. And so I like the sort of complexity of writing something that's both simple and complex at the same time. It's a specialist book. I hope it's interdisciplinary, more multidisciplinary. I mean, I wrote it, and it addresses issues in history, economic history, Mexican history, geography, and anthropology. So my hope is that scholars from those three disciplines, history, geography, and anthropology, will read it. It's too big to really, it would never be read in an undergraduate course, of course, but it might be read in a graduate course if it came out in paperback. We want to be taught to feel, not for the heroic artisan or the sentimental peasant, but for the peasant in all his coarse apathy and the artisan in all his suspicious selfishness. That's a quote with which I begin my book. It's a quote from George Eliot, taken from The Natural History of German Life. I begin the book that way, and because I feel that in both anthropology and history, there's been a romanticization of the peasant, of the artisan, of the subject of study, and that we're really not taught, it's not acceptable to feel for the peasant in, as the quote says, his coarse apathy. We're more and more taught that they aren't apathetic, that apathy is something to be avoided. Apathy is rethought. Things that are apathetic reactions to a certain social situation are then taken as somehow protest, as somehow really, really incisive social critiques. And I think that more and more the peasant, or the object of our study, is a projection of what we would like them to be rather than what they are. And I saw that all the time in academia. People would study protest movements, and they'd sort of raise up their object of study into some sort of, as I say, incisive, as people having some sort of incisive understanding of their social situation. And I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to say, we really don't have to do that to our subjects. We can just present them as they are, and there's some sort of beauty in the everyday existence of people, no matter how coarse or how unpleasant it may be. And you know, I read some of the, I guess, poems by Baudelaire, who was sort of, I guess that was one of the perspective that the realist authors started to take, starting with him. And I just felt that was a good metaphor with which to begin the book, that let's just look at the everyday life, even though it's banal or trite or uninspiring, but let's just look at it and appreciate it for what it was.